Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a new edition of the Daily Debate. In tonight's show, we're going to be tackling the economic file here in Egypt. It'll be in two halves. The first half will be regarding the IMF vowing to help boost the Egyptian economy. We're going to be talking about the form and the mechanisms of actually the IMF helping the Egyptian economy. The second of which will be Egypt's economic competitiveness plunging to new lows. We're going to be talking about how these new lows can be improved, and really, is there any hope to see some improvement in the near future? But before we start our discussions tonight, let's check out our first report regarding the assistance of the International Monetary Fund in helping the Egyptian economy, and we're going to be right back with our distinguished guests.
The International Monetary Fund has praised Egypt's stimulus plan to revive the economy and welcome support for the cash-strapped country from friendly Arab states, but said introducing much-needed reforms to restructure the economy remains a challenge the government is yet to tackle. IMF spokesperson Olga Stankova said the fund was ready to cooperate with Egyptian authorities to help the country overcome its economic difficulties. Stankova said the IMF was aware that some government officials had given statements in which they said that Egypt does not currently need a loan from the IMF. She also pointed out statements by Christine Lagarde, the IMF head, last month in Washington, affirming that the IMF was ready to cooperate with the Egyptian government and support the Egyptian economy. Lagarde proposed to send a mission to Cairo if requested. Minister of Finance Ahmed Galal has said that Egypt did not need the IMF loan at the moment. Galal said Egypt appreciated Lagarde's comments and would cooperate with the IMF to implement a value-added tax to replace the current sales tax. The minister explained that Egypt did not need the loan because the need for cash and to assert its credibility among international investors through an IMF agreement no longer needed. As for investors' trust, Galal said it would be regained via the transitional roadmap and a stimulus plan to create jobs and revitalize the economy. In August, Galal announced the government would spend $3.2 billion on labor-intensive projects and services to help the poor. There are also plans to build roads and railways, water and sewage treatment plants, low-income housing, and to extend natural gas supplies to homes and utilities in industrial areas, especially in Upper Egypt. 2 years of negotiations over a $4.8 billion loan have passed without an agreement between the two sides, mainly because the reluctance of successive Egyptian governments to impose reforms that would squeeze living standards, such as lifting fuel subsidies and raising taxes.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and to shed more light on the assistance coming from the IMF to Egypt, we're joined here in the studio by Dr. Ibrahim Abdullah, the Professor of Economics and International Finances at the American University in Cairo and Al-Azhar University. And we're also joined by Mr. Akrum Bastawi, the economic expert. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thanks.
Dr. Abdullah, first of all, the International Monetary Fund has praised the Egyptian government for the stimulus plan to help the Egyptian economy. How would you evaluate and rate the Egyptian government's performance in reviving the Egyptian economy and the stimulus plan so far?
Bismillah ar-Rahim. There is no exaggeration to mention that the international finance is available for all countries, but to Egypt may be hesitated from time to time according political atmosphere. Now, some organization funds international put some conditions, some items. If the country applied these items, you can go to get this international finance. Like that, local international loans, international aids, international grants, international subsidized whatever equipment, finance, liquidity, technical support, whatever. Any countries, the condition of safety change from time to time. If the condition of safety is stable, the international organization will offer all the subsidies. But the atmosphere which Egypt offering it, there is no hope to stability. From time to time, troubles, political science, troubles, political science, political. The political as a whole, from country to other, it change from time to time. Troubles, all men will troubles for factories, for universities, for squares. This affected the international case of country. If the Egypt put fixed rule for this troubles of political, maybe international organization give or offer all the money.
Mr. Bastawi, now the International Monetary Fund offered to actually help the Egyptian economy and boost the stimulus plan by about $3 to $3.2 billion. Now, is that different from the $4.8 billion that Egypt has been negotiating over the past 2.5 years, or is this a different kind of financial aid? And they also really praised the role of the Egyptian economy in boosting the economic situation here in Egypt. Do you really think the Egyptian economy is working well in boosting, the Egyptian government is working well to boost the economy?
I think that given the nature of the atmosphere with which the government has to work in, Dr. Ibrahim spoke very much to the point about that, the fact that the political environment is not necessarily conducive for the level of stability needed to be able to have any real economic development or serious economic growth. In the compressed period of time with which they've had to work, they've been in office since August. It's only now mid-October, so it hasn't been very much time. They've taken a lot of the correct actions, in my view, that you need to take given the circumstances that they're in. But when you talk about the economic situation, there is a lot that needs to be done, and there's very little time, and there's also very little power available to this government in real terms, because the perception by the wider community, both in terms of domestic investors and international investors, owners of facilities which are idle and which are not operating, is that this is a temporary and interim administration. And it is yet another interim administration. And so the question is, what kind of economic policies will be on the table in 3 months, in 6 months, in 9 or 12 months? And really, until that kind of question can be answered, no matter what the government does, serious reactivity in the economy, both from domestic sources as well as international sources, will have to wait. So the short answer is, it's great that the IMF sees this in a positive way. The stimulus approach is better than the austerity approach in terms of what the country needs. This particular administration has been given a little bit of space to take a stimulus approach because of the inflows of cash and investment that has come in from the Gulf Cooperation Council countries. But again, the question is sustainability. So the IMF package that is being discussed right now is probably going to overlap quite a bit with what was in place, being discussed in place for the past 2 years, but it's probably not going to look exactly the same. So there's a core that will be the same. And I think that that core will require certain reforms, again, to subsidies and all the issues which go along with an austerity approach. Now, the mix of a stimulus and an austerity approach, if it's done surgically and selectively, might make some sense. But again, just to cap it off, even the IMF cannot really reach a conclusive arrangement until they know who's going to be in charge and what kind of economic policies will be in play when we look at 6 months, 12 months, 18 months down the road.
Yes. Dr. Abdullah, now the Minister of Finance, Ahmed Galal, said that the loan coming from the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, is not really needed at the moment. Yet, the IMF is offering the $3.2 billion as stimulus as opposed to the austerity measures. And as Mr. Bastawi mentioned, that maybe we can have a mixture of both, the stimulus and austerity as well. Do you think that we don't need the loan, the austerity loan from the IMF worth $4.8 billion, even though that you've mentioned the economic state here in Egypt really needs a very strong push?
The financial aid from Arab, from Emirat, from Saudi Arabia, that is push to economic, push to economic. But the economic problems wait. Greats. Like that, the economic problems about industry, the economic problems about agriculture, the economic problem about small-scale projects, the economic problem about irrigation, water, all of this, all financial aids from Arab, from international organization must put in priorities. Mr. Ahmed Galal, Minister of Finance, put future action for these priorities. According the liquidity available from Saudi Arabia, from Emirat, will put in ideal solution for this. Some problems will need more and more liquidity from Arabian, from Saudi Arabian, from Emirat, but we have good self-finance in our economic. The economic in Egypt, which need safety, more than liquidity, which need safety, because international areas like that 6 October city